Picture this. A quiet night flips wild when my husband drops a crazy idea. And no, it's not a midlife crisis motorcycle. We're chasing something huge, laughing at epic fails, and then, boom, a jaw-dropping twist ties it all to a moment 35 years ago. Stick around, 'cause this one's gonna light up your world. Hi, before we get into this tale, drop a comment with where you're listening from, and hit that subscribe button. Are you ready? Let's roll. I was reclining on the couch in our cozy living room, surrounded by a circle of throw pillows I'd collected over the years. A steaming cup of peppermint tea sat on the coffee table, wafting small curls of minty paradise into the air. Outside, a soft spring breeze rustled the trees. And inside our house, our old radio hummed with the smooth beat of a jazzy song, some Ella Fitzgerald tune that always made me tap my foot on the floor. It was one of those nights that was a hug, that warm, enveloping kind of hug that James and I had perfected over 35 years. At 53, I had learned to appreciate these quiet moments well. My 55-year-old husband, James, was tinkering at the dining table with one of his model airplanes. The man's got surgeon's hands when it comes to those tiny propellers, and I could sit and watch him all day, his brow furrowed in concentration. We've been a team since our 20s, raising kids, paying off a mortgage, and fumbling through life day by day. That night, though, didn't seem quite right. Not wrong bad, just different. The radio staticked as it switched to a ballad, and I exchanged a look with James. He'd put down his tools, unusual for him mid-project, and was wiping his hands clean on a rag. Then he met my gaze, those brown eyes crinkling as they hit mine, and said, what if we did something entirely different? His voice had this small quiver to it, like he'd been rehearsing the line in his head. I sat up, gripping my tea a little more tightly. New? I said again, my thoughts racing. Was he going to suggest that we sell the house and move to Florida? Get a dog? I mean, we'd talked about a puppy before, but this was larger. My heart turned over rapidly, half surprise, half apprehension. James is not a rash man. He's the type of man who maps out grocery lists like they're battle strategies. Whatever this was, it mattered to him. Wait a minute, I said, setting my mug aside and sending the blanket tumbling off my legs. What are we talking about here? New car? Vacation? I was joking, trying to be funny, but he didn't crack a smile. He ran his fingertips over each other, nervous tick I hadn't witnessed since he proposed all those years ago. Not like that, he said, leaning into the chair. I've been thinking about this for a week, Em. Something different. I just didn't know how to go about it. A week? That surprised me. James had been mulling this over, and I hadn't even heard a whiff of it. Was I so attached to my routine? I took a deep breath, focusing. Okay, you've got my attention. Spit it out. My tone was soft, prodding, but inside me I was bracing myself for anything. Maybe he wanted to make woodworking his career or, shudder, do one of those crazy fitness boot camps. I could already see him in spandex, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. He smiled, but it wobbled as if he was still building the courage. It's not insane, I swear, just not the usual. Something for us. The way he said the word us made my heart heat up. Whatever this thing was, it was not about him striking out on his own. It was about us. I braced myself, leaning against my knees. James, you're torturing me here. What is the plan? He paused, then stood up and removed something from the kitchen counter, a small stack of papers he'd been keeping there. He sat back down and pushed them across to me. I've been reading about couples who try new things together, he told me, his words rushing faster. Not necessarily vacations or hobbies, but ways for, I don't know, relearning each other, keeping things fresh. I blinked, trying to play catch-up. Rediscover each other. We'd been married longer than some people had been alive. I knew all the quirks, all the laugh lines on his face. But the intensity with which he was gazing at me, serious, nearly vulnerable, suggested this wasn't a joke. Wait, so you're telling me we're stale? I asked, half teasing, but also attempting to gauge where this was going. No, he said hastily, flinging his arms out. I adore what we have, Em. You know I do. But I've been thinking how we're not getting younger. Life's short, isn't it? And I don't want us to just drift. He tapped on the papers. I discovered this thing couples do. It's not what you'd think, but it might be fun. Possibly even bring us closer. Closer. That single word hung suspended in the air, and I felt a rush of something. Excitement, maybe? But a shiver of fear, too. What if this thing was too outside my comfort zone? I trusted James with every fibre of my being, but going into the great unknown after 35 years of security, that was a tall order. Still, I couldn't crush his dreams. Not when he was sitting there, wide-eyed, waiting for me to speak. Okay, I said slowly, piling up the papers but not looking at them yet. You've got me interested. What's going on? I smiled weakly, attempting to ease the tension. He grinned back, but it was boyish, fidgety, like the first day we'd met. Promise you won't laugh? He asked. No promises, I shot back, smiling, but go ahead and give it a shot. Go on. He sucked in a breath and I steeled myself again. This was it, the moment our lovely evening turned into something I'd never in a million years anticipate. And honestly, part of me couldn't help but be curious as to what he'd conjure up. Because if James, my no-nonsense, no foolish idea ever James, was that excited, it had to be something good. Looking back, I don't know why it took me so long to get it. We'd built this nice, cozy life, but maybe he was right. Maybe there was room for something more. Not because we were broken, but because we were strong enough to try. That night, as the jazz played on and the wind crept through the open window, I realized, even after all these years, James could still surprise me. And that alone was enough to convince me to go along with whatever was coming next. James leaned in, his fingers drumming on the table as if he was getting ready to release something bombastic. Okay, here's the thing, he said, voice low but even. I read this article on couples who learn astronomy together. Like stargazing, telescopes, the whole 9 yards. What if we did that, Em? I stared at him, my brain racing. Astronomy? That was his groundbreaking scheme. I chuckled, but the look on his face, beaming, like a kid who'd just come up with some new gadget, paralyzed me. He was not joking. I set the papers down and sat back, crossing my arms. Wait, stars? Like looking at planets and such? Hey, I said, trying to get used to it. He nodded fast, already getting out his phone. Yeah, watch this, he said, opening up a YouTube video. It was this couple in somebody's backyard using a telescope pointed up at the sky, going on and on about how it made them closer. James stopped it and glared at me. I know it sounds ridiculous, but just hear me out. We might be able to buy a telescope and learn the stars, perhaps even see a couple of planets. It'd be different, wouldn't it? Other. There was that word again. I couldn't argue with that. We'd never done anything like this before. I mean, I adored stars like anyone else, but I'd never thought about going after them with James. However, his excitement was infectious. Okay, I said, a small smile. But why astronomy? What's got you so fixated on that? He grinned culpably and rubbed the back of his neck. I saw this publication at the hardware store. Stars for Two or some cheesy title like that. It was talking about how couples do this to be connected, you know. Not just gaze up at the sky, but feel each other in it, I thought. We could use a little of that. His eyes flicked over to mine, searching. We're fine, Em, but I want to continue growing with you. This could be neat. Neat, growing up. I allowed those thoughts to filter through. Some part of me wanted to rag him. What? You think we're boring now? But I didn't. He wasn't mistaken that we had to shake things up. Life was short, like he had said. And really, the idea of both of us under the stars, learning this whole astronomy thing, was kinda neat. So what? I said, tilting in close. We'd be one of those goony couples on TV, bickering about who's which star. He laughed, huge and real. Yeah, probably. I'd mess it up and you'd fix me. Same old thing. Then he went quiet, his smile morphing into something softer. But seriously, Em, I think it'd be different. Like a different way of seeing each other. What do you think? I didn't react right away. I took his phone, watched the video again. The woman was giggling as the guy struggled with the telescope, the woman nudging him gently. It wasn't flashy or grandiose, just two people experiencing something new. I glanced at James, his fists clenched together, anticipation. You really like this, huh? I said, relaxing. Yeah, he admitted, almost in a whisper. I didn't want to sound dumb, but yeah. That's when he dropped the bomb. I already got us a telescope. $50 from some guy on Craigslist. It's in the garage. My jaw dropped. You what? I laughed, whacking his arm. James, you bought it without consulting me? He raised his hands in a gesture of innocence, smiling like a little kid. I couldn't resist. It's old, kinda battered, but it works. I tested it out last night, saw the moon up close, blowed my mind. I laughed and shook my head. That was him diving right in, then pulling me along behind him. You're crazy, I said to him, but I couldn't hide the smile on my face. Okay, let's do it. But if that car is a clunker, you're taking it back. Deal, he said, springing almost out of his seat. He picked up the magazine he'd shoved across the table and opened it. See, they say start small. Find Orion's belt, maybe Jupiter. We can try tomorrow night if the weather's fine. His words were tumbling now, full of plans. I'll set it up in the backyard. We'll take coffee, make a night of it. I watched him, this guy I'd grown up with, now zipping around like a man who'd just won the lottery. And believe me, I did too. That little small spark of new. Coffee's fine, I said, playing along. But I'm bringing blankets. No way I'm freezing out there watching you play Space Cowboy. He chuckled. Fair. You're the brains of this operation anyway. Then he got quiet again, looking at me with those eyes I'd fallen for decades ago. Thanks, Em, for saying yes. I shrugged, but my heart was flipping over. Don't thank me yet. If I trip on that telescope, it's all over. We both laughed, and for a moment, it was like we were 20 again, dreaming up outlandish adventures. But this was no caprice. This was us, taking a step together. Finally, after we had cleaned up and the radio had cut into a saxophone solo, I was smiling. Astronomy was not what I was looking for when he started this lecture, but maybe that was the point. Life is full of curveballs, and James had just delivered a good one. I did not know anything about stars, but I did know us. And if he thought this was going to help us come together, then I was in. Amusing how an otherwise quiet night can become something that flips the whole world upside down, just because one of you has the guts to dream out loud. The next night, there we were, hanging around our own backyard like two kids on a camping trip. I was wearing a thick red and green plaid blanket wrapped around my neck, and James was struggling with that old telescope he'd found on Craigslist. It was the sort of thing you'd have in a museum, all scuffed metal and creaky legs, but he promised it would function. The air was chill, that kind of spring cold that has you grateful for coffee, so I'd taken a thermos with me. James had his star chart, some crumpled printout from the internet, and was muttering to himself as he spun dials. Okay, Em, we're going to find Jupiter tonight, he announced, as if on a mission. I stood holding the flashlight, holding it above the map as he tampered with the lens. You sure this thing even works when it's pointing up? I teased, watching him nearly turn it over. He shot me a look, half angry, half amused, and muttered, It's all right, just needs some love. Love, eh? It seemed like it was going to require duct tape. We made our first try and it was a bust. He pointed it out over the lawn and swore he'd found a star, but I demonstrated to him that it was just Mr. Henderson's porch light down 3 houses. I laughed so hard that I nearly cried, I swear, and the two of us were in stitches. Okay, genius, have another go, I said, pushing him. He played with it, peering through the eyepiece, and then, boom, His whole face changed. Come here, he growled, calling me over. I released the blanket and peered through. At first it was a blurry dot, but he worked at it, and there it was. Jupiter. A tiny, bright ball with narrow stripes. I breathed in sharply. No way, that's a planet? He wrapped his hand around mine, holding tight. Told you! That's Jupiter, Em. 1,000,000 miles away, and we're looking at it. I backed away, my face contorting with a silly grin. You're a genius, I said to him, and he puffed out like he'd won a prize. We took turns gazing, handing the thermos back and forth, the coffee warming us up as the cold seeped in during the night. It was alive, as if we weren't really a middle-aged couple in someone's suburban backyard, but travellers on some wild adventure. I couldn't help but think about how crazy it was, this little device showing us something so far away. You ever wonder what's out there? I asked, leaning against him. He shrugged, still scanning through the scope. All the time. Makes you feel small, doesn't it? I nodded. Small, yeah, but also connected. Not only to the stars, but to him. We'd been a unit as long as I could remember, but this was different. Like we were privy to some secret the universe had entrusted us with. Then, abruptly, the sky flashed. A burst of light flashed by, followed by another. James! I exclaimed, catching him by the arm. Is that... He looked up, eyes wide with wonder. Holy meteors! We gave up the telescope, fell onto the grass and simply gazed. Dozens of them, like silent fireworks. I started counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, and he continued laughing. 5, 6. Where did these come from? He wondered, bewildered. I didn't know, but who cared? It was magic, plain and simple. We sat there side by side, the damp grass spreading through my jeans, but I didn't care. This didn't show up in your magazine, did it? I asked, glancing sideways at him. He chuckled. Nope. Guess we hit the jackpot. Jackpot? Yeah, that's what this was like, not only the meteors, but tonight. I took his hand again, and he wrapped his fingers around mine. Thanks for this, I whispered. He squeezed back. Told you it'd be fun. It was fun, though. We were out there too long until my back ached and the coffee was depleted. By the time we staggered in, I was still smiling. We're doing this again, right? I asked, taking off my shoes. He nodded, lugging the telescope into the garage. Every clear night we get. Next is Saturn. Saturn? I had no idea what it even looked like, but I was already psyched. As I crawled into bed, I ran it over and over again in my mind. Jupiter's glimmer, the shooting stars, James's ridiculous grin. I realized then this wasn't about stars. This was about us, finding something new to chase together. I'd always thought we'd gotten our rhythm going, but maybe we'd just been getting started. That night, under shooting stars in the lawn, I was young enough to be singing karaoke, and younger than I'd felt in years. And you know what? James was right there with me, proving to us that we still had a whole lot of tricks up our sleeves. A few months later, astronomy wasn't something we did for a one-time thing. It was our thing. We'd upgraded from that wonky telescope to somewhat less wonky one, and our backyard was mission control. James and I even joined the local Stargazers Club, a ragtag bunch of quirky individuals who welcomed us with open arms like old friends. We'd gather around at meetings, swapping tips over donuts, and I'd catch myself thinking, how'd we end up here? It was nuts, but I adored it. One night we broke out the gear and caught our first glimpse of Saturn, those rings gleaming like something out of a sci-fi movie. I elbowed James, grinning. Not bad for a couple of beginners, huh? He laughed, adjusting the lens. Beginners? No chance. We're pros now, Em. I watched him, his face lit by the moonlight, and it hit me. He wasn't the guy who fixed the sink or cooked the greatest burgers anymore. He was my partner in this crazy cosmic adventure. We'd stumble over star names, argue about which way was north, and laugh until we hurt, unwrapping a layer of ourselves I didn't even know was there. You ever think we'd be this into it? I said, sipping coffee from our dented thermos. He shrugged, his eyes still behind the scope. Nope, but I'm glad we are. Should have done it years ago. His easy, warm voice was one I'd always loved, but now there was something in it, a spark. I felt it too. Saturn spun out there, millions of miles away, but here, we were nearer than ever. If I'd known stars would do that, he teased, I'd have brought you out here decades ago. I chuckled. Yes, well, I would have stumbled over the telescope and sued you. We sat there, he laughing, and the night wrapped around us like a blanket. The club had brought us in contact with stars, certainly. But with more than stars as well. Friends, shared anecdotes, even plans for a road trip to a stargazing festival later that fall. During one of these meetings, an older gentleman named Tom approached us. "You two should talk at the next one," he said, crunching a donut. "Tell people how you ended up with this." People had eat it up. "We are?" I inquired, about to gag on my coffee. "We're not speakers," James teased, playfully shoving me. "Come on, Em, we're like stars now." I rolled my eyebrow, but it was true. We'd been promoted from ignorant newbies to the couple whose telescope advice was asked for by people. This was insane. "Fine," I said, "but you give the speech." He was okay with it, and the following week spent arguing over the speech, snickering about silly drafts and spilled coffee. That night under Saturn, though, it wasn't speeches or the club, it was us. I leaned against him, the grass chilly under my sneakers. "This is better than I thought," I said. He put an arm around me. "I told you. You're my starry-eyed co-pilot now." I rolled my eyes at the pun, but my heart grew. This wasn't a hobby. It was a reminder we could still surprise, still grow. Then came the curveball undefined, a few weeks later. We're at the club, setting up for our big talk. Undefined. I'm nervous, fiddling with my notes when James pulls me aside. Undefined. "Em, I've got something else," he says. His voice low. Undefined. I freeze. Undefined. What now? Undefined. Another telescope. Undefined. He shakes his head, pulls out his phone and shows me a grainy photo, a meteor streaking over a field. Undefined. "I took this that first night," he says. "Been holding on to it." I blink at it. "Okay, sure, but why the surprise?" He grins, big and sly. "Look at the date." I do. And my heart drops. It's not any night. It's the exact date of our first kiss, 35 years ago, beneath a sky we didn't even know we'd chase someday. "No way," I whisper, my eyes blazing. He nods. "Found it by accident, thought it'd be our little secret until now." I'm speechless, gaping at him, this man who's still springing surprises out of nowhere, undefined. "You're not real," I get out, laughing through tears. Undefined. He winks. "Define property. Gotta keep you on your toes, Em." We're just about to step up and speak, the room humming, when he takes my hand and says, "One more thing. I entered us into that festival. Front row seats. I don't even have a chance to say anything before the lights dim and we're off. But all I can do is think, this isn't finished." A beginning then comma in the middle of his speech, he drops the mic, literally, and bellows, "Who's ready to chase a comet with us tonight, undefined?" The crowd erupts, and I stand there in mute shock as he drags me out the door, telescope in hand, into a night just beginning. If you like this, click the thumbs up button, subscribe, comment, and share it with your friends.